Hi, Justin. Sarah from The Upcoming. How are you doing today?
I'm okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for taking the time. Maybe for people who haven't seen Swimming Home yet, you can give us a brief intro to your film.
So it's from a novel by Deborah Levy, and it's about a couple who are on holiday with their daughter, and they find a naked woman floating in the pool, and invite her to stay. That's the kind of the beginning premise. As Deborah Levy's books, things never go the way they're expected. So all of the things that you would think it might be about, it's not. And I found that, for me, as when I read the book, I found that very intriguing, and it had a kind of a truth to it, because I find tidy storytelling not necessarily doesn't feel like it has the truths, in as much as family life. There are sort of gaps between people in family life. Family life is uneven. you know Relationships are uneven. That you can be very you can really be kind of angry with somebody, and you can love them at the same time. You can be completely ambivalent to somebody, and then they can die. And then you can be very upset, and that really sort of touched me. I thought that was a very interesting kind of modern story. Um so that's the kind of story that we're trying to explore.
And it seems a kind of a perfect companion. Actually, I just very recently watched Hot Milk, and
Right.
the Deborah Levy adaptation. Although I have to admit, I haven't actually read her books, but there's definitely some shared DNA there. Kind of this something quite mercurial or quite slippery about what genre we're in and which characters we're supposed to
Absolutely.
be empathizing with, and what do you think it is about her writing which is so kind of alluring and also sort of lends itself quite well to cinematic adaptation?
I think it's slippery. I think that's a really good word. I think her characters are slippery. Because we always make assumptions, and also we try and put people in boxes. We immediately, that's how we sort of go through life. We walk down the street making assumptions about people, but actually when you meet them, they're never like that. So I think that is her truth. Her realism is in the slipperiness, is in the mercurial nature of things, and that things aren't black and white. Things are very gray areas, and you can be two things at once, three things at once. And I think, yeah, Hot Milk is I mean, it's a very different film, but the Deborah Levy-ness is very strong. And I think it's quite challenging for people, because we actually do, you know, part of storytelling is telling you, oh, the world can be really tidy, and it's like this. And actually our experience of the world is quite different. It's very complicated. We can sit in comfortable homes, and then we can look at our laptops and read about these horrendous things going on in the world, and somehow we have to then go and make dinner. you know and do all of these things at once. That is part of the condition of modernity. So I think Deborah Levy is a very modern writer, and fantastically so.
And what is the process like of taking a text and translating it to screen? Because of course, a novel can be so rich in the language and the characters creates, but it's quite a different medium trying to put that in a visual way. And obviously, not everything that's in there can be fit in just a couple of hours of a film. So what was your approach in that sense?
No, so the process, it's a long process, but I think that the book is actually quite cinematic. I mean, what was interesting about the book is that it reminded me of films. It reminded me of La Piscine, the French film. It reminded me of The Swimmer, and when I met Deborah, she talked about The Swimmer. She talked about the John Cheever's novel, and said that's where the title had come from. So I think it was written in a very she writes about color, she writes about texture and mood. It's very much a holiday mood. So I think that translates quite easily to film. But obviously, there is the thing of adapting. I think there's a different rhythm to books than films. Books have, much longer, and they're much more about the internal space. You can have, Isabel wondered. In the film you can't sort of, unless you write Isabel wondered. So, there's a way in film where you have to show, to expose how people are feeling. Part of that, my translation of it was trying to find this language, this inner voice language that Deborah has, her kind of surrealism, for want of a better word, the oddness, the disquiet of her books, the internal disquiet, and how do we show those? And so, you know, as a visual medium, you show those visually. So I think film, is works very well from books, but it's just that the structure is different, and obviously you can't, you need to lose characters, you need to lose lots of events. So it's you just have to kind of streamlining it. And also, I think when you read a book, everyone reads a book in their own head. So my Deborah Levy is not going to be the same as yours. And when I make a film, it's going to be my Deborah Levy. That's who's sort of putting it out there. So it's not easy, I don't think, to translate a book into film, but it is, it's a very personal thing, I think.
In terms of the look and feel of the film, I mean, there's such a sort of, strong feeling from the beginning that something's just a little off. So, we sort of have this kind of luxurious villa. Everything's supposed to be sort of relaxing, but it's not. There's a lot of
Yes.
tension. And obviously, as the different layers of the film and the characters peel back, that comes more to the fore. So what kind of atmosphere were you aiming to create? And what were some of the tools in your toolbox? I mean, even sort of, I guess your background as a visual artist, really using the colors and iridescence of the pool, perhaps the way it's shot, sometimes we're often just like getting body parts, there's something slightly abstract in the way you're shooting.
Yes, but I think that there is an abstraction in the shooting. I mean, I would say that I've been on a lot of miserable holidays myself. Often you go to these brilliant places and you feel, what did I bring? Oh, I brought my worries with me. So often in these quite synthetic places, you can feel this sort of tension. And there's nothing as miserable about sitting by a really beautiful pool and just feeling kind of like, So I think it's the inner world that I was trying to express, and obviously with framing, it's where are you looking? You may be looking at this beautiful landscape, but actually you're looking slightly off. And so what I tried to do is, yes, and obviously there's the music, which is a very important part of it, is to have this kind of sense of dis-ease and disquiet that rises. The French call it sous l'eau. It's the translation is called sous l'eau, which is underwater, and they have an expression in France, which is all of your feelings that are under the water, so it all may be nice on the top of the pool, but underneath it's kind of bubbling away, and that's where all the tension is. So I did, I wanted the film to hold the tension, but at the same time also enjoy the beauty of the landscape and the color, and that kind of nostalgic feeling that we have when when you see a photograph of, even when you just come back from holiday and you look at the photograph, immediately there's a kind of nostalgia attached to it. So we shot it in 16mm film to really kind of heighten that feeling of like, oh God, I remember that being warm around the pool, the summer, even in the middle of the winter, when you see a picture of blue sky, it gives you a kind of a feeling. And it might give you a feeling that's slightly sad. The blue sky doesn't always make you happy.
That sense of unease also kind of extends to this feeling of sensuality and like the sexual tension that can be there. But it's not sort of the one that maybe we're used to kind of seeing. It often feels maybe a bit awkward, or the tension is not something that's completely straightforward. So
No,
kind
no. I
of
mean, I didn't want,
complexity.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I mean, it comes back to the book. The book sort of presents itself like it's going to be an erotic thriller, but then it's not really erotic. It presents itself like it's going to be a relationship drama. It's not really about the relationship. So it's sort of, it always goes in these directions and just sort of veers off, or doesn't quite land in the way that you sort of expect it to. And I thought, yes, and there is something that, obviously Kitty is a woman who's invited. She's this beautiful woman, and she arrives and she's naked, and that Joe has had affairs, but it somehow Isabel isn't really troubled by those. So you suddenly you think, is this going to be about a man who's in love with a beautiful young woman? And but no, it doesn't deliver in that way. And I really like that about that from Deborah's novel, is that she doesn't deliver what you she sort of points you towards something, and then kind of veers you in the other way. With the same with the characters, you're sort of pointed. Is this about a girl growing up? Is this a coming of age story? Not really, but it moves around, and I think that's yeah. I found that really interesting, and it's also that sort of awkwardness, which is it's I don't think sexuality is not straightforward. Desire is not straightforward. I mean, when I read the novel first, 2011, I had it's 2012, my son was born in 2011. I was remarried, but I had also been widowed in 2004. And so I was kind of terribly happy when my son was born, and I was blah, 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 but none of that would have been happen had my wife not died in 2004. It was a very complicated feeling to sort of manage within ourselves. And I think as human beings, we do manage these very complicated feelings. And I think that's what Deborah's novels do. They just kind of nudge us towards them a little bit. And in a way, what I would like is people to watch this film without having to kind of go, oh, it's a relationship drama, it's a blah blah blah, just to sort of allow it to wash over them and to sort of feel it, because that the film is quite sensual. That there's the sensuality of the color, the music, the landscape. So I think it's best loud and sort of absorbed without overthinking it, or even it's almost like you don't want your head to talk. You just want your head to shut up and just kind of absorb.
And what I guess would probably set it apart, or make it quite distinct from Hot Milk, the fact that it does lean more into these more absurd moments, and almost whether it's magic realism, the sort of like the cabaret kind of
Yeah.
club
Yeah.
moments, or the naked guy standing on the boat with his flair, the pony in the restaurant. Was that something that was also quite like fun to get your teeth into and just play around a bit more creatively than maybe other films we might see in this genre?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I wanted to be playful. I like, it's not a comedy, but I wanted it to be playful. I mean, when we shot the guy on the boat, and he's like, "Where are you going?" "I'm going nowhere." Just, we all just laughed, and I yeah. So there are these moments of kind of of humor and hilarity and just sort of general kind of lightness, which I think is obviously part of life, an important part of life, and you can have those with sadness, and I think that's important. But I'm as a filmmaker, I come from fine art. So I come from a kind of even as a teenager, I loved Dada. I loved the craziness of that kind of stuff, where it just takes the world and turns it upside down. Dada was a reaction to the First World War. So, these things come out of, can often come out of quite traumatic things. But, I'm trying to say it without swearing, but there's a certain element to it, which is a kind of, it's slightly anarchic. And I think Deborah has that very much. She's quite anarchic.
I haven't even mentioned the cast. I mean, I just love, this sort of like, the four different actors mainly, or five as a total, but particularly at the centre, Ariane and Mackenzie and Christopher, and of course, Freya, kind of a newcomer. I almost imagine you on this shoot and perhaps all living in this villa, maybe sort of being quite fluid between rehearsal time and, when you're shooting and when you're not, because there's just this incredible dynamic between all of
Well,
them.
weirdly, we talk about it when I talk to them, and I'm in touch with all of them, and we all talk about it as a moment where we were all there, and it was, I mean, we were shooting next to the Aegean. When we wrapped each day, we went for a swim. It was kind of amazing. So I was very lucky to get that cast. Obviously, it was my first film. It was kind of amazing to get that cast. Ariane, I've known her for a long time, but Chris and Mackenzie, I didn't know that, and also we had Nadine Labaki, who is, you know, Oscar-nominated director, won the jury prize in Cannes as a director, and she's playing a fairly small part in my first film, and I was just kind of amazed that she said yes. And came with so much generosity, and you know, and actually also she was the only person who'd grown up in war. She grew up in Lebanon during in Beirut in the war, so she also had a kind of, you know, when we were talking with Mackenzie about being, you know, going away to a kind of war zone and then coming back to the family, Nadine knew exactly what that was about. There was a real generosity of those cast, and they did. You know, they really put themselves out there for the film. I mean, I think, you know, that's when I've done Q&As with them, people say, what is it about the role that we're interested in? They were just like, it's not the role, it's the film. You know, it's kind of like, it's the thing. You know, we thought it was sort of interesting that he wanted to make a film that was quite odd, and we don't get scripts like that. So it was an opportunity to be playful and try things that perhaps they wouldn't, you know, all the time do. But yeah, I mean, you know, they are superb actors, really superb actors.
And in terms of the takeaways from the film, or I guess as you already mentioned, you know, maybe it's more about leaving the cinema with letting it wash over you, and you know, maybe you can read into it as, you know, like in terms of its metaphors, or you know, this is about sort of marriage and marital repression, or dealing with trauma, or it's
I think all of those things. Yes, I mean, I'd love people to walk away with questions rather than answers. Just being able to, you know, just having a moment to question, a moment to sit down and kind of let it wash. I think it works much better like that. I think if you try and shoehorn it into, it's about families, or it's about trauma, it's about growing up, it's about desire, you know, I don't think it kind of works in that way. It's much more like a sort of, you know, something that just you put on you, like, and it absorbs through your skin. I'd say it's an absorbent film, if there could be such a genre.
And what are you going to be working on next for your second film? Do you already know yet? Are you letting the dust settle?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I've written a film that's called Owl, Cat, Goose, Pig, and it's a religious film, and it's about a woman who's trying to escape from an all-powerful ex-lover. Yeah, and we're starting casting it now, and I've just been in Wales looking around. We might shoot it in Wales, so yeah, it's coming.
Not as sunny as Greece, but still
Not
beautiful.
as sunny as Greece, and it's entirely different. It's you know, it's set in the late 1800s. It's on a farm. It's yeah, it's totally different, completely different. But you know, a little bit strange, I would say.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of it with me. I can't wait for everyone else to see Swimming Home. And of course, best of luck with his next project as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Justin. So nice
Thanks.
to chat
Bye.
to you.
You
Thank
too.
you.